Okay, looks like it's that time. So I'm going to say aloha, everyone, and welcome to a special presentation hosted by Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, dedicated to the very special topic of Hawaiian monk seals. We're all very excited that you're here. I'm Darla Palmer Ellingson, your MC, and I'm also the local radio show host of the public affairs program Island Environment 360, Maui's only commercially broadcast public affairs show on environmental and related Hawaiian cultural topics, aired on the stations of Hawaii Media. Tonight's presentation is part of Maui Nui Marine Resource Council's monthly Know Your Ocean Speaker Series, usually held on the first Wednesday of each month at 5:30 on Zoom. This monthly series is supported by the County of Maui Mayor's Office of Economic Development. And a few things before we get going, you'll notice that your microphone is on mute. Please keep it on mute during the presentation to avoid distractions. We do invite you to submit questions by using the Q&A button on the lower edge of your screen. You might need to scroll down so that that menu appears for you. And we'll leave time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters from the Marine Mammal Center's dedicated hospital for monk seals, Ke Kai Ola on Hawai'i Island. We have two guests today. Dr. Sophie Whoriskey, a Hawaiian monk seal conservation veterinarian, started with the Marine Mammal Center in 2015 as the intern veterinarian in marine mammal medicine and pathology, where she spent 2 years training with marine mammal medicine experts. In 2020, she returned to the center as a full-time Hawaiian monk seal conservation veterinarian. She leads the center's Hawaii animal care operations, dedicated to the rehabilitation, conservation, and research of the endangered Hawaiian monk seal. Also with us is Laura Van Heukelem, the Response and Operations Coordinator at the Marine Mammal Center. Born and raised in Hawaii, Van Heukelem received both her bachelor's and master's degrees from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in marine biology. She's participated in many research studies in both Hawaii and the Northern Mariana Islands. As the Response and Operations Coordinator, Lauren oversees monitoring of the endangered Hawaiian monk seal population on Hawai'i Island and runs the center's 24-hour hotline for reporting seal sightings around the island. Please join me in welcoming both Dr. Sophie Whoriskey and Lauren Van Heukelem to the Zoom stage. Welcome.
Mahalo, Darla. We're happy to be here.
Oh, great. Well, I'm just going to turn it over to you both to take it away with your presentation.
Sounds great. And thank you to the Maui Nui Marine Resource Council for having us this evening and for all of you for joining us. We'll jump right into this presentation. We wanted to start by just giving you a little bit of background about who we are as an organization. So the Marine Mammal Center is the world's largest marine mammal hospital and education facility. And really we're the largest because of the sheer number of patients that we receive on an annual basis. So we're responsible for covering rescue and rehabilitation for marine mammals in about a 600-mile area of the California coastline, as well as the entire island, big island of Hawaii. So we get anywhere from between 600 to 800 patients per year. And the Marine Mammal Center started in 1975, so over 45 years ago. And it literally started with a small group of volunteers, about 3 people and a bathtub. They were concerned about some of the marine mammals they were seeing washing up on their shores looking ill, and they started this nonprofit called the Marine Mammal Center. And over the years, we've grown substantially. So you can see in the top right-hand corner here, this is our current facility. It is just across the Golden Gate from San Francisco in the Bay Area, and it's quite large. We have capacity for over 200 animals on site at a time. And we also operate several satellite facilities. So we have 2 facilities along the California coast, both in Monterey and San Luis Obispo counties. And those are basically triage facilities where we can take in animals and then travel them up to our larger hospital facility in Sausalito, California. And they can also run basic field operations in those areas to provide support for things like entangled animals that are in those more southern parts of the range. We also have our hospital here in Hawaii that was opened in 2014. So it's our newest facility. So this is a graph of the number of patients that we've seen come through the doors at the Marine Mammal Center. So on the bottom x-axis there, you have the years, and on the y is the number of patients. So as you can see, we've grown quite a bit over the course of the years as our facility has grown and as the public has become more and more familiar with our operations. We get more and more calls each year about marine mammals that are coming up on the shore. And you can see in 2015, we had almost 1,800 animals come in that single year. So quite a large number of animals, and that affords us some unique opportunities. So this is a glimpse of some of our California patients, especially. We deal primarily with pinnipeds, so seals and sea lions. Most of what we see are California sea lions, as well as northern elephant seals and Pacific harbor seals. The rest tend to be infrequent visitors, and we do some care with cetaceans, so dolphins and whales, and the occasional sea turtle will creep its way into our facility as well. And really our mission is to advance global ocean conservation, and we do that in a variety of ways. So every animal that comes into the hospital gives us an opportunity to learn something about the health of that animal, which when we have as many numbers as we do, also gives us a glimpse of the health of the population in California in general, and can really give us some insights into what's going on in their environment. So every animal is an opportunity to learn something, as well as we can advance medicine for marine mammals with every animal that comes into our care. So we learn how to treat some of the most common ailments that they face out there in the wild. And we can also partner with a whole bunch of different academic institutions or other government agencies to do scientific research, because we do have hands-on so many animals. We can collect things like blood samples that can be used for further research to really help increase our knowledge about populations in general. And then the ultimate goal, of course, for every animal that comes through the door is release. We also have a very robust conservation and education program, and that's really to try and share all that knowledge that we're learning. We want to get the message out there, all of those signals that we're getting from these animals in their environment. We want to be able to get out into the public so that everyone is aware of what's going on their shore or in their local areas, as well as really just provide information and resources for people to become better environmental stewards for their ocean home as a whole. And with that, I believe I will pass you over to Lauren, and she will tell you a little bit more about our Hawaii operations.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. As Dr. Sophie mentioned, I'm going to be talking a lot about what we do in Hawaii. And as most of you know, in Hawaii, the only pinniped that we have is the Hawaiian Monk Seal. And so here are just a couple of photos. On the right side, you have an adult female, and then you have a young juvenile male in the other photo. So it's estimated there are approximately 1,400 Hawaiian monk seals left in the entire world. All of those reside in the Hawaiian Islands because they are endemic to Hawaii or only found here. And those population, or the 1,400, can be split into kind of two areas. You have approximately 300 down in the main Hawaiian Islands, or 20%. And those are the ones that we would see if we're out on the beaches here in Hawaii. Whereas there's about 1,100 up in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands within Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Monument. And these are individuals that we wouldn't see on the daily basis because really only researchers and cultural practitioners can go up into this area with special permitting. Just to give you a little background on Hawaiian monk seals, for the most part, they are solitary. Usually when you see them hauled on the beach, you'll see only one individual, or if you see multiple, you might see them with some space in between them. This would be different than what you would see with maybe sea lions or elephant seals, where they come together in large colonies. Occasionally you will see some monk seals interacting, and usually it's a juvenile with an adult or two juveniles interacting. In general, on average, we think they live between 17 to 25 years of age, and the oldest individual recorded was 34 years of age. And they become reproductively active between 5 to 10 years of age. When we look at their reproduction, their gestation period is between 10 to 11 months, and they usually will only give birth to one pup a year. We have a few rare instances of twins, but for the most part, one per year is what we see. The pups are born with black coats, as you can see in that photo there, and they're usually between 25 to 30 pounds at birth, and by the time they leave their mom, they are over 100 pounds. They nurse between 5 to 7 weeks, occasionally up to 8 weeks, and during that time, the mom is not actively feeding, so she's not leaving the pup to go and hunt. She may, if a fish passes by or there's a nice eel in front of her, she's going to eat it, but she's not going to leave the pup for an extended period of time. Their diets consist of really a large amount of different things. They're generalist feeders, meaning they'll eat fish, they'll eat crustaceans. We'll see them eating eels, octopus, really anything. But a lot of their food is found on the seafloor, so you'll find them foraging along the bottom of the seafloor. And they can dive up to 1,800 feet. However, usually you'll see them around 300 feet for their foraging dives. And these dives on average are between 6 to 8 minutes. So sometimes if you're watching a seal in the water, you might see it go down for about 6 to 8 minutes and then pop back up. That might be an indication that they're out there hunting. They can, however, hold their breath for 20 minutes at a time. So when we talk about the threats, we're going to split this into the threats most common for the northwestern Hawaiian Islands and then the threats that are most common in the main Hawaiian Islands, because they do differ a little bit. So in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, or the islands that are within Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Monument, you're looking at food limitation. It's kind of counterintuitive. You would think a marine protected area, lots of food, lots of fish. There are lots of food and lots of fish, but there are a lot of apex predators. So there are a lot of sharks, there are a lot of big ulua or trevally, and then you have a larger monk seal population. So you have a lot of these big animals that are eating those lower levels along the food chain. So there is food limitation. There's also shark predation on pups. So there's the Galapagos shark that will come and actually prey upon the pups when they're out on the shore. Entanglement from derelict fishing gear. So a lot of marine debris finds its way to the Hawaiian Islands, especially the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and they can become entangled in this debris and actually drowned. We have instances of male seal aggression. And what this means is basically a large group of males will gang up on a female in the process of mating and cause injury to her or even death. And then there's habitat loss. So with these northwestern Hawaiian Islands, you're looking at a lot of low-lying islands, so a lot of really sandy, flat beaches or large volcanic or small volcanic islands, and anything can kind of wipe out these sandy islands. So you're looking, if you have sea level rise of even a little bit, that takes away a lot of habitat. Or in the past, we've had hurricanes that have come through and decimated these areas. In the main Hawaiian Islands, a large number of our threats are through fisheries interactions, so hookings, entanglement in fishing nets or gill nets. We're also looking at entanglement from trash, marine debris, same as we would see in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Something that's different is toxoplasmosis, which is a disease that is carried by cats. It comes from cat feces, which gets washed into the water. It's the same disease that they tell pregnant women to be aware of, like don't scoop the cat litter box when you're pregnant. It's the same disease. In humans, it's not usually deadly. In Hawaiian monk seals, it is very deadly. Human seal interactions, unfortunately, are a threat. So, harassment of seals, displacing them from the beaches, things like that. And then we do unfortunately have some instances of intentional killing as well. We have several conservation efforts in place to help to create a more robust population. As far as research, there are summer field camps that NOAA goes up to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and they actually will send out field camps that'll stay for several months up there, and they'll count Hawaiian monk seal numbers. They also look at turtles and some seabirds as well. And during those times, they evaluate the seals. And these are actually how we get a lot of our patients at Ke Kai Ola, as Dr. Sophie will talk about a little bit later. There's also a vaccination program for Hawaiian monk seals against something called morbillivirus, which is similar to distemper. And it's luckily has not been found in Hawaii yet. However, in other areas of the world, morbillivirus has been very detrimental to seal populations. We have the Marine Mammal Center here in our Ke Kai Ola Rehabilitation Hospital. Since our opening, we have treated many, many patients, and we will talk about them in a little bit. And then just creating marine protected areas such as Papahanaumokuakea and the expansion of that area in recent years, and habitat restoration. With our education efforts, each island has its own response network. For Hawai'i Island, we're looking at the Marine Mammal Center, or our program. If you're on Oahu, you're looking at Hawaii Marine Animal Response. And for Maui and Kauai, it's a NOAA-based program. There's also programs done by Department of Aquatic Resources, like the Barbless Hook Project. And these are projects that will hopefully, if a seal or a turtle or anything gets a hook in its mouth, if it's a barbless hook, the hope is that it'll be able to get the hook out on its own. Whereas with a barbed hook, likely intervention will be needed. Education and outreach is key. Programs like this, where we talk to the public, as well as just any knowledge that you as a member of the public have that you share with anybody, a visitor or your family. Any bit of education helps. There are resources for the public. If you look at our website, the marinemammalcenter.org, or if you go to the NOAA website, or just Google Hawaiian monk seal, there are a lot of resources that you can download about Hawaiian monk seals. And then there's signage on beaches as well. So Ke Kai Ola translates to the healing sea. And as mentioned, we opened in 2014. And since we opened, we have treated 36 Hawaiian monk seal patients. And 36 might not seem like a big number. However, when you're looking at a population of 1,400, that's about 2% of the population. And it's estimated that approximately 30% of all Hawaiian monk seals are alive today due to rehabilitation efforts from groups like the Marine Mammal Center, as well as NOAA. And if you think that number is high, what you're looking at is for every seal that we rehabilitate, that seal goes back into the wild and hopefully expands the population. They go on to have pups and so on and so forth. So since our opening, I mentioned we have treated 36 patients, and this is just showing you on the x-axis the year, and on the y-axis the total admits. So you can see in 2015 we had 9 seals, and that was our highest year to date. In 2020 we had our lowest number, and the reason for that is that most of our monk seal patients actually come from the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And in 2020, due to COVID, those summer field camps that I mentioned earlier, they did not go up to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, so we didn't get those patients from up there. Just to point out that it takes a village to do the work that we do. We work under NOAA. So NOAA is the federal agency that kind of handles marine protected species. And then we work with the Rehabilitation Center. The US Coast Guard flies in a lot of our patients, so we partner really closely with them, as well as a lot of these other organizations and many more that I have not highlighted on this slide. So our Hawaii program resembles very much so our Sausalito program or our California programs at the center. We have our animal care program, our response program, and our school and youth program. Our school and youth program, we have a program called Nakokua o Ke Kai, which goes into the classrooms for 4th graders and works with them. We also do public outreach. We work with the Moku Papapa Discovery Center in Hilo. So we do a lot of outreach programs for our youth. On response, these are the people that you would see out in the field that are setting out the signs when we have a Hawaiian monk seal in the area. And on Hawai'i Island, we actually stay and we do outreach with our seals. So we will stay anytime there's a seal on the beach, and we'll do public outreach. So we'll educate visitors as well as our local community members alike. And then animal care, because we do have the Rehabilitation Center here on island, we will have to prepare food in our fish kitchen, which is what you see on this, our two gentlemen volunteers doing there. They're preparing a rich diet of herring for our patients. And then on the other side, you see a Hawaiian monk seal being boarded onto a scale. So we do weigh our patients whenever possible so we can keep track of their progress over time. And now I'll turn it back over to Sophie.
Thanks, Lauren. So it might seem a bit strange to have a typical patient, but like Lauren mentioned, we do have those 2 NOAA research cruises that go up to northwestern Hawaiian Islands every year to monitor the population in general. And really, when the vision for this hospital was first kind of being laid out, they wanted to build it so that it would be ready to care for animals and really try to address some of the threats that those animals were facing. And one of the threats that Lauren mentioned in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands was food limitation. And what that translates to, or tends to translate to, is poor juvenile survivorship. So a lot of the young pups, when they wean, they're just not able to compete with all of the other apex predators that are out there. And their chance of survival to the first or second year of life can be pretty low. So Ke Kai Ola was born in part to try to address that particular issue, to build this facility that could provide top-notch medical care for these animals, but also provide adequate and proper housing for them for an extended period of time, so that we could have these patients on site for up to about 6 months or so, and get them to a really good, robust weight, give them a chance to grow during that first year, so that when we bring them back to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, they're much more robust and ready to kind of compete with some of those other apex predators. So that's kind of what we mean by a typical patient, those poor malnourished pups that look like this. You can tell he's malnourished because a healthy Hawaiian monk seal should look really big and round, like a nice big sausage. But this little guy, you can tell he's really skinny. You can see all those skin folds around his body. And he also has what we call a peanut head appearance. So the neck actually tapers in. You shouldn't be able to see a neck on a monk seal. They should be nice and wide. But this young animal, you can tell, is quite thin. So this is Mea Ola. She is an example of one of these earlier patients that came in probably 3 or 4 years ago from the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, specifically from Turn Island. So again, you can tell this is an emaciated seal, young seal. Again, that peanut head appearance, you can actually see ribs and other bony protrusions in this particular individual. So very, very thin, and had a poor chance of surviving to her first year of life. But through some care and some time here at Ke Kai Ola, she blossomed into this big, beautiful, healthy seal that we see here. So she went from 42 kilos to 168 kilos while in care, which is probably our best kind of achiever, if you will. She really grew and thrived here. So she was released at a weight of 168 kilos back in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And we typically conduct that release in collaboration with NOAA. So we work very, very closely with the NOAA field research teams and the group in Oahu, the Hawaiian Monk Seal Research Program. It's a really wonderful partnership where they can go out and they have the experience and have been leading the way for decades in the conservation of this species and in population monitoring. So when they go out, they can identify these animals and say, okay, this individual is probably not going to be here the next time we come out in 6 months. So let's take this patient to Ke Kai Ola and then have them go through the rehabilitation process. And 6 months later, the goal is to get them back on the next cruise and bring them back to the same island where they were originally taken from. So that's our typical patients that we see here, but our hospital is also built to take in animals from the main Hawaiian Islands for a variety of other illnesses or ailments that we see. So we do have a current patient on site. This is a female Hawaiian monk seal pup. Her name is Eleu, and she actually came to us from Midway Atoll about a month ago. And this was another example of the wonderful partnerships that we have with some of the governing bodies that are on the various islands. So she was actually spotted by a U.S. Fish and Wildlife volunteer who was out on Midway Atoll doing other research, and he had been monitoring the monk seal populations while he was up there as well. And he noticed that she was quite thin for a pup of her age. So she was getting near to her weaning period, and she really just wasn't as robust as the other pups that were out there. She wasn't as big by about half. So he flagged her and let our partners know at NOAA that, you know, we have this young female monk seal pup that's not looking so great. So that started a whole chain of events. And we were very fortunate that the stars aligned, and our partners at the Coast Guard were able to take a Coast Guard C-130 and take us up to Midway and pick up this particular animal. So she's on site right now, and she is basically here for malnutrition. So she's got a poor body condition, and her chance of survival to her first year of life was also very, very slim, less than 1% chance. We do, when they do arrive on site, we do a full physical exam to make sure that we're not missing any other potential causes for their poor body condition. Sometimes it's not just food limitation. They could have some other underlying disease that's causing that poor health overall. So we do make sure that we're looking for anything else that could be causing that condition. Fortunately for her, she has been thriving. We haven't seen anything else on any of her diagnostics. We do blood work and we screen for a variety of different diseases. And she's come up negative on all of those things. So she appears to be in relatively good health, just small. So we're feeding her lots and lots of groceries to get her up to good weight. And she is gaining every week, which is fantastic news for her. One of our biggest challenges is she's a very active young pup. So her name actually means energetic, alert, bright, and nimble. And that's all of the things that she is. She's constantly swimming. She's not like other pups that tend to nap for hours of the day. She almost never naps. She's doing things all the time. So we have been very busy trying to keep her enriched. So we have a variety of different, what we call enrichment items. And those are basically different objects that we can place in her environment, in this kind of pool environment that's otherwise relatively boring. We want to stimulate her to keep foraging and to keep thinking and keep her curiosity going, so that when she gets back out into the beautiful coral reefs around Midway, that she's still engaged in her environment and she's searching out food. So you can see in the bottom right-hand picture here, there's a milk crate. And if you look closely, there's some things, silver things sticking out of them, and those are actually herring. These are 3 of our previous patients that were released last August. But basically, this is an example of a feed enrichment device. So you can stick a variety of herring into the milk crate slats, and you can put this milk crate in a variety of different places, whether it's in the shallow part of the pool, in the deep part of the pool. And that encourages her to go and interact with it, try to pull the fish out, whether it's in the water or out of the water. That still engages her with her environment. It makes her move a little bit more and think a little bit more. We have other items that are a bit more like puzzle boxes, where she actually has to lift different slats open to be able to get a fish out of a part of the enrichment item. So it really stimulates her to move things around and to keep up with her natural foraging activities. So she is doing very well with all of those items, and we're hopeful that we can release her in a month or two when the research cruise heads back to the northwestern Hawaiian Islands this fall. I'm going to share another case with you. This was another animal that came to us just recently from one of the main Hawaiian Islands. This was in February of this year. A male juvenile Hawaiian monk seal. His name was RK58, and he was rescued from Kauai. And the reasons he was rescued was actually an unfortunate incident where he was attacked by dogs that were off leash. So you can see here, he's got some signs of trauma around his face. He's got infection in the dog bite wounds that were around the face, as well as a large amount of swelling around his neck. If you notice in that picture, it seems like he's got a big bulge on the right side of his cheek. That's all swelling and inflammation associated with these bite wounds. And it was reported that there was a dog attack about a month before we actually were able to rescue this particular animal. So we believe that he actually lost weight. You can tell that he's a bit skinny in this photo as well. So the infection kind of brewed for a little while, and it actually caused him to lose some weight as well. So he came in for both these traumatic injuries as well as some loss of nutrition. Fortunately for him, he responded very well to antibiotic and fluid therapy. So we were able to mostly support him through all of those injuries. And he did gain weight while he was in care with us, and was able to be released just a few weeks later. So he did very well in care. And that's an example of where we can respond to what was an unfortunate incident, but be able to provide the appropriate care to get him back up to health. I did forget to mention he actually did have a fracture in his left foreflipper as well. So one of the bones was cracked due to some of the bite injuries that he received from some of those dogs. But happy story, he was released back on Kauai just a few weeks later. And then another patient who's very dear to us here on the Big Island, this is RA20. She's an adult female Hawaiian monk seal that's a resident of the Big Island and has been spotted numerous times at a variety of places. But basically last year, she was spotted right around the Fairmont Hotel, and she had a large plume of blood in the water around her. And it was suspected at the time she'd had a late-term miscarriage. There were some signs of recent labor that she was exhibiting, and she was looking overall pretty lethargic and down. So our team went out to evaluate her, and we actually did end up bringing her into care for evaluation. When she did come in, she was actually quite bright and alert. Sometimes they do get a little bit of an adrenaline rush when they come into care here. It's an abnormal environment for them. So she perked up a little bit once she actually came to the hospital. Again, with her, we ran a whole variety of different tests to try to determine what had happened to her, why there was this, where she was exhibiting some signs of lethargy, and why she had potentially had a miscarriage. And she actually tested positive for a bacteria called Brucella, which is a known bacteria to cause abortion in other terrestrial mammals, but hadn't been documented to cause abortion in a Hawaiian monk seal before. But we were able to run a few different diagnostic tests that revealed that this is probably the main reason that she did have this abortion. Fortunately, she also responded very well to antibiotics and care, and we did release her after just 2.5 weeks. She responded quite quickly, and she was quite bright and sassy while in care. She was actually a bit of a difficult animal to care for. She was an adult and she wanted nothing to do with us humans. So we were able to release her after a couple of weeks. And fortunately for us, because she is a Big Island resident, we have been able to do a fair amount of follow-up monitoring. And I will let Lauren take it from there.
Thank you, Sophie. So yeah, this is kind of to highlight the importance of really public outreach and how you guys can help. So anytime you spot a seal, reporting it is really important because that is how we track these individuals and how we can track our patients. So on the Big Island, RA20 was our first Big Island patient. And after her release, we did a lot of post-monitoring on her. And this was during COVID. So it was really just whoever was out on the beach, people who were trying to, get out of their houses, going down to the beach to do little walks. If they reported her, that is how we tracked her. So we now know we've kept track of her since that March 2020 release. She's in great body condition. She's molted since that release. And she's seen all along the west side of the island. So it's a really great opportunity to show, a seal that came to our care and has gone out, and we're able to monitor after that process. So these are some great numbers to have. If you ever see a seal out on the beach, especially if you see the Hawaiian monk seal and there aren't any signs up, there's a statewide hotline. So that statewide hotline is that first number that you see there, 888-256-9840. And that statewide hotline is actually not specific to Hawaiian monk seals. So if you see a turtle in distress or a cetacean in distress, you can report it on that hotline as well. So there are multiple kind of areas you you select what animal you're trying to report, and then you select what island. So this is the statewide hotline. If you are on Maui, specifically, that's the number you want to call for Hawaiian monk seals. And then on the island of Hawaii, if you're on vacation on Hawaii, or maybe you're a resident of Hawaii that's joining us for this presentation, the number is 808-987-0765. So again, even if you don't think the seal is in distress, if you see a seal without a sign, especially if it's in a heavily trafficked area, definitely call it in. And that's one of the ways that you can really help to protect these Hawaiian monk seals. The other way is to give seals space. So the recommendation is that you stay at least 50 feet away. A good way of kind of determining if you're 50 feet away is something called the rule of thumb. So you essentially will put your thumb out in front of you and to the side, so diagonally. And if your thumb covers the seal, you're approximately 50 feet away. It's going to be different for everybody, but that's really just a good, easy way of getting about 50 feet away. The other way is if that seal reacts to you, then you are too close. So if it looks at you, if it raises its head, if it barks, then you should take some steps back. The other way is if you have a dog, please keep it on a leash when you're out on the beach. As you can see, dogs and seals interacting can have really bad effects on both the seal and the dog. Our K58 is a great example of that, with his injuries sustained from a suspected dog attack. And we really don't want anything to happen to your pets as well. You know, Hawaiian monk seals do have a full set of teeth, and they are probably larger than your dog. So keep your dog on a leash is a great way to help out. Getting involved, if you just want to learn more about Hawaiian monk seals, if you go to the marinemammalcenter.org, you can sign up for our newsletter, and that'll tell you a little bit more about Hawaiian monk seals, but it'll also tell you about our patients in California. So if you're just interested in seals or marine mammals in general, it's a great way to get more information. If you're looking to volunteer on your island, you can check out the NOAA website, and it will direct you to the appropriate organization for your island. And with that, I think we're gonna leave it open for some questions.
That's awesome. Very informative, and gosh, I envy you guys. You have some very cute patients as well. And I learned that I'm not overweight. I just have a healthy monk seal physique, right? Actually, I had a question, and I hope that some other people chime in the Q&A with some questions. You know, this came early on. You know, first, Dr. Sophie mentioned that overall in 2015, there were 1,800 patients. And then Lauren mentioned that there was 9 that year in Hawaii, which was their highest figure. Was there something that happened in 2015 to cause these higher numbers?
So I can certainly speak for California, at least. In 2015, there was what was called a UME, or an unusual mortality event, for California sea lions. And that's something that's designated by the government, where you're seeing a massive number of a particular marine mammal stranding on the shores for an unknown reason. So they classified it as an unusual mortality event in that year, and that's when we saw all those numbers. And some of you may remember there was some conditions, environmental conditions at that time. You might remember the term the blob, which was a big warm water anomaly that was in the Pacific Ocean. And that caused a whole shift in environmental conditions. And the belief is that basically it shifted all the prey resources for those animals. And so female California sea lions were having a much harder time finding the appropriate nutrition, the right amount of food for themselves, let alone for raising their pups. So we started to see vast numbers of pups showing up on the shore in that particular year. And that led to the really high numbers of California sea lions in particular, but it also had trickling down effects into other species as well. We saw more elephant seals that year, as well as Guadalupe fur seals, which is another animal that we don't see as frequently, but all of a sudden we had many, many more than we'd had in other years. So environmental conditions really did play a role in those high numbers in 2015, at least in California, and it's possible in Hawaii too. It might have been a rougher year out in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, because those environmental effects tend to stretch across oceans as well.
Interesting. Michelle wanted to know a little bit more about what you feed the patients. I know you mentioned a I had that one slide with dinner being made, but can you tell us more about the diet at the hospital?
Sure. The base of the diet is primarily restaurant quality herring. And we chose that fish because it's a fish that we can get in the right volume to start, but it's also a very nutritious fish that has a good amount of fat in it. And that helps us get weight on these animals in an appropriate time frame, since they really, 6 months sounds like a long time, but in terms of their lifespan, it's not that long of a time to make sure that they're in good body condition. So it is a good nutritious fish. And that makes the majority of their diet. But we do try to offer them a variety of other items as well, including live prey items, both from an enrichment perspective, but also to kind of keep some of those skills up and make sure that they're learning how to catch a live fish, not just getting too used to getting our recently thawed herring from people. Exactly. So we want them to have those different experiences while they're in our care, so they can get a variety of local fish species. Live tilapia is another thing that we've been able to provide them. Occasionally we'll have a lobster, a farmed lobster, or a live cucumber. So a whole variety of different items could come their way.
Wow. Well, they really look like they have gained weight very well. So what advice do you have for other conservations geared towards marine conservation? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I guess what advice do you have for other marine conservation, primarily best places to start and or key areas to focus on?
Sorry about that, having a hard time unmuting. But yeah, great question. I think conservation starts at education. And that's really what we do a lot of, and what each island has programs for, is if you educate the youth, if you educate the public, that's really going to start the discussion on next steps and what you can do. As far as working with an endangered species, it can be pretty difficult just because of permitting issues, but definitely if that's something that you're really interested in, most endangered species already have some type of conservation program in effect that you can join, or you can volunteer with different organizations that work around the conservation of these species. I hope that answers that question. If there was more to it,
Sure.
please put it in the Q&A.
Yeah, no, that was good. Michelle is asking about, I think this might actually refer to something that happened on Maui, when Hawaiian monk seals interact with divers and are relocated. Is that dangerous for their survival, and why? And if I could tag on to that, how often does that occur? Because, there's only one incident that I can recall in recent memory. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit and Dr. Sophie can jump in. But relocation is kind of a drastic measure.
Mhm.
It's something that takes a lot of thought, and it has to be something that's pretty significant happening in order for it to happen. So it has to be something that's a danger to both the seal as well as, humans.
Mhm.
Ways that we can really prevent those types of interactions is a lot of times we see those close interactions when that individual as a pup was getting accustomed to people. So people were too close to it as a pup, and it kind of imprinted on people as being fun. And, you know, um, they didn't necessarily fear us. So then as a pup, they're 25 to 30 pounds, and that's not an issue. However, they get to their 400 to 600-pound adult weight, and then, they're rubbing against divers, or, a hug from a monk seal underwater could, is maybe it feels good, but they can hold their breath 20 minutes and you can't hold your breath 20 minutes. So it's a dangerous situation. As far as relocation goes, it's pretty rare. Um, it has happened in the past. I am not sure the actual statistics on the survival rate of those individuals that were translocated. I will say it's tough to do when they're adults because they will come right back.
Right.
So they do come back to the areas. They can swim far distances. We have individuals that we see on Hawai'i Island that are frequently seen on Kauai or Molokai. So they travel pretty far distances. So translocation is not the most effective method of kind of helping with those issues.
Sure. Thomas is asking, do your facilities entertain guests or offer tours or educational events? And I know that you mentioned volunteers, but how many volunteers are at the facility as well?
Yeah, so we have approximately at Ke Kai Ola, we have approximately 150 volunteers between our animal care and our response program. I'd say there are between about 50 animal care volunteers that are on site, maybe a little bit less than that, but we'll say 50 for now. But in Sausalito, we're looking at about 1,300 total. So our total volunteers for the whole Marine Mammal Center is about 1,300. We did previously do tours prior to COVID through the Friends of NELHA. NELHA is the kind of campus that we're on, which provides us with fresh seawater for our pools that we use for rehabilitation. Right now, we are not doing tours. We do sometimes do special tours for school groups on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, at the moment, we're closed to the public just due to COVID.
Okay. Chanel wants to know what the average amount of time patients stay with you are.
So that question depends on what they've come in for. So our typical patients, the ones that come from the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, because the goal is to get them back to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, they typically spend about 6 months with us, because that's basically the time frame that the cruises are running, which it's very expensive to get a group of monk seals to and from the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So we base it on kind of the cruise schedule. So they'll be with us for months at a time. Other patients that have come in, like RK58, who came in from the main Hawaiian Islands, or RA20, can be with us for as short as just a couple of weeks, depending on what kind of ailments are coming in with, how long that treatment course needs to be, and how well they're doing in rehabilitation as well.
Okay. So Heather had a really interesting question. She says, monk seals look very much like some other types of seals, especially ones I grew up with in Alaska. What makes a Hawaiian monk seal a monk seal?
Shooting a toughie at us. So a lot of it is location and genetics. So you're looking at a population that's been separated from the other population. So genetically they're different. Also, Hawaiian monk seals are true seals, and maybe some of the ones that you've seen up in Alaska, some of them would be true seals, but some of them would probably also be like sea lions or Orderaidae. So if they had the ear flaps, then they're like the sea lion type of seal. Whereas the Hawaiian monk seal, as you can see in the picture, you don't see those ear flaps. They also have a difference in the way they walk or they move, not walk, the way they move on land. So Hawaiian monk seals do something called galumping, which is my favorite word, and it essentially means inchworming. So they inchworm up the beach. So they don't use those fore flippers or their hind flippers really for that movement. They're using more the momentum of their bodies. Whereas a sea lion, you'll see them use those long front flippers or fore flippers, as well as their hind flippers. They'll tuck them under them to kind of, move up the beach. Same with fur seals. They do that as well. And then maybe Sophie can add in anything else that I forgot.
What Lauren said, but also there's some recent genetic evidence that is actually showing us that Hawaiian monk seals seem to have evolved from seals that come from the southern hemisphere, so not the Alaska region, which is kind of an interesting fact. Some of those seal species from the southern hemisphere seems to have taken on some big migrations and then somehow landed in Hawaii and evolved to be this beautiful tropical seal that's found nowhere else in the world.
I learned another thing. I think that's what I do when I get back on the boat when I'm diving. I'm galumping up over the edge. So I'm going to remember that. So Marty was asking, where does the herring come from? They seem to think it's North Atlantic, or is that their normal prey, or where are you getting the herring?
It is not their normal prey. So we're a bit limited in this fish species that we can use because we need to be able to store a larger number on site. So we've chosen herring both because of its nutritional content, but also it's a schooling fish, and we can get it from a couple of different locations. We either get it from some suppliers in Alaska or potentially on the east coast of Canada, depending on where the herring supply is best for the year.
Okay. And Sherry had a couple of questions. I'm gonna combine them together. She wants to know what the normal weight and size is for Hawaiian monk seals compared to other seals. And then Lauren, I know that you had mentioned offline, if you see them on the beach and they look, and they're not moving, they could be asleep. So she also wants to know, do they sleep on land?
Yeah. So for the first part of that question, Hawaiian monk seals on average are between 400 to 600 pounds. So depending on what other seal you're looking at, some seals are smaller and some are bigger. So, harbor seals are probably typically a little bit smaller than that. And then elephant seals can be significantly larger than that. So it's kind of depends on which way you go with seals and seal species. But yeah, on average, between 400 to 600 pounds for most individuals. And males and females are the same size. So that's a little bit different than some other seal species that you see where maybe the male is bigger than the female or the female is larger than the male. Hawaiian monk seals, you can't really tell the difference between them based on size. And then second part, sorry, I lost track. What was the second
Sleeping.
part? Oh, sleeping, yeah.
They sleep on the beach.
Yes, so they can hold their breath underwater 20 minutes, but a 20-minute nap isn't really conducive to saving up a lot of energy. So they will come up on land and rest, and that rest time can be anywhere from, an hour or less to overnight or 24 hours. So they can stay up on land for a large amount of time. They don't need to stay wet all the time. And they do sleep on land. So that's really important as to why we want to give them their space. As you can imagine, if you were sleeping and somebody kept interrupting you when you wake up in the morning, you're not well rested. So same thing with Hawaiian monk seals. If they continue to be disturbed while they're sleeping on the beach, they might not be as successful when they go out hunting because they're tired, because they didn't get that good day or night sleep. So yeah, if you see them, most of the time when they're on the beach, they don't move very much. So it can be a little bit alarming when you come up on a Hawaiian monk seal and you're like, why isn't it moving? Is it dead? So instead of approaching them, because we don't want to disturb them, call it into the hotline for, the statewide hotline, or if you have your specific island's hotline number, call it in and those individuals on that hotline can respond and just make sure that that seal is okay.
Okay. Yeah. So don't disturb it, call it in. And this is, I think, kind of a related question, but Heidi wants to know, do monk seals have to haul out on land to regulate their body temperature? Does that have anything to do with it?
I'm going to shoot that to you, Sophie.
Not exactly. They're not like reptiles where they definitely need to come out in the sun and really take advantage of that warmth to warm up. They are mammals, so they can regulate their own body temperature like we would. But certainly if they're cold or if they've gone on a really long dive and they want to come out and warm up in the sun, they will certainly do that just like we would. So it's a mix of things.
Okay. Well, I think we are at that time and we're going to leave it there. But gosh, I just wanted to give a big mahalo to both of you. It was such an interesting presentation. Lauren Van Heukelem and Dr. Sophie Whoriskey from the Marine Mammal Center. And to learn more about the work of the Marine Mammal Center, visit www.marinemammalcenter.org. This event is part of the Know Your Ocean Speaker Series hosted by Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, a nonprofit working for clean ocean water, healthy coral reefs, and abundant native fish for the islands of Maui Nui. Maui Nui Marine Resource Council is a co-founder and co-manager, along with the Nature Conservancy and West Maui Ridge to Reefs initiative, of a unique community-based ocean water quality monitoring program called Ke Kai Ola, which tests ocean water at 29 locations in South and West Maui every 3 weeks. With technology, Maui Nui Marine Resource Council is expanding the water quality data they're gathering to better identify causes of impaired ocean water quality along Maui shorelines. Ma'alaia is one of Maui's impaired water quality sites, suffering mostly from excessive sediment, which harms corals' ability to feed themselves and reproduce. Maui Nui Marine Resource Council is tackling this sediment pollution problem. In early 2020, Maui Nui Marine Resource Council launched its oyster project in Ma'alaia Harbor to use the filter feeding abilities of caged oysters to remove sediment from the water. The council is also working upslope in the adjoining Pohokea watershed to prevent sediment runoff into the harbor. Some of the work includes installing fire breaks and repairing large erosional features. With tourism on the increase, Maui Nui Marine Resource Council's visitor education program plays an important role, teaching visitors how to protect our local coral reefs while they snorkel, swim, dive, and paddle. It includes coral reef signs at 39 beach locations, displays at Kahului Airport, radio and print ads, social media ads targeted at visitors who are on Maui, and digital display ads. This educational effort is supported by the County of Maui Mayor's Office of Economic Development. We ask that you support these coral reef conservation programs with your tax-deductible donation to Maui Nui Marine Resource Council. Along with the satisfaction of making a difference, you'll also get to choose from some very special swag offered as a thank you gift for your support. You can view and share this presentation on Facebook. It's at facebook.com/Maui Reefs. You can also view this and past presentations on YouTube at Maui Reefs. And we're actually going to have another radio interview with these two great guests on this Sunday morning at 9 a.m. on the radio. So tune in for that. And thanks to Maui County Office of Economic Development, our sponsors and supporters like you who are making so much good work possible to protect coral reefs. And thank you for joining us this evening. Be well, take care of yourself and each other and this beautiful island. Have a good evening, everyone. Aloha.